Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. And in today's review, after a highly anticipated 18 months and after collecting every single Transformers Studio Series Constructicon, I am finally going to be unveiling the Transformers Studio Series completed in-hand Devastator. This review will showcase you comparisons between this new Devastator and the original 2009 Supreme class. It will showcase comparisons between other Studio Series figures, as well as a comparison between the G1 Combiner Wars Devastator. Without further ado, you are here with me to unveil the first in-hand look at the Transformers Studio Series Devastator, fully completed, and here it is, looking absolutely incredible. For me, it has been an incredibly long 18-month wait ever since this figure was first announced at MCM London Comic Con way back in October of 2018. However, I've got to say that this was definitely worth the wait. This is by far one of the best movie figures I have ever purchased. The fact that each and every one of these 8 Constructicons combine to form this beautiful looking piece, and all of them have their own exceptional robot modes and vehicle modes, to me is just astounding. This is one of the best figures Hasbro has produced in years, and dare I say, probably the best movie figure they have ever created. Now, before I get in depth to Devastator, I have done reviews and showcased how to combine this figure throughout my entire tenure here on YouTube, where I've reviewed various of the Constructicons. In my most recent Overload review, I did showcase how you combine Overload to the legs as well as to Scavenger and the rest of the upper body. So if you are looking for how to combine it, definitely check out my previous Studio Series Devastator reviews or just the other Constructicons, and there you'll be able to see how you can transform each of these figures up into their individual components and begin to complete them so that you can have this finished robot mode. Now, in this review, seeing as this is such a massive figure, I'm going to be breaking it down. I'll be discussing some of the good points, some of the bad points of the figure, giving you comparisons between this figure and the original 2009 Supreme class Devastator. I'll also be giving you comparisons between this and some of the Studio Series figures, just so you can get a sense of how big this figure truly is. I'll be giving you a rundown of the articulation, some of the things that I would have liked them to have improved upon, and some of the things that I think are amazing. So without further ado, let's take a closer look at the figure's details. So starting off with, of course, the top of Devastator's head. This is formed up of Voyager class Mixmaster, which was an absolute astounding figure, so be sure to check out the review for that figure if you haven't already. We can really see here the exquisite movie accurate detailings of Devastator's face here, with the incredible red paint application, which is completely accurate to the movie. The plethora of different eyes that he does in fact have, all decked out in this super nice green paint application. We've also got some different tubing and some lovely sculpted in detailings on the crest. The jaw is in fact articulated, revealing a plethora of different teeth, or the grinder sections you could say, all picked out in a nice silver paint application. So you can choose to have Devastator's head closed, or in fact opened, as if though he's about to vacuum up some Autobots. If you watched my Overload review, you would know that this piece here does come with Overload. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to tab into securely unless you push it backwards and stick the smokestacks in. Then it seems to not really go anywhere. However, I do like flaring these smokestacks out to the sides, as I just think it gives that more transformed look and that more expanded look that Devastator had within the movie when he was inhaling all of the debris from Egypt. Taking a closer look at that upper cylindrical section, we can see all the grinder details and all of the green paint applications. If you do wish to see a more up close look at this, once again check out the Overload review, but just locking it in via these smokestacks, giving you a side profile of it as well. We can see here the different tires of Mixmaster. I do like how this all transforms and how the front of the cab ends up at the back. I think that that looks really awesome. If I had any criticisms regarding the head sculpt, I wish that it was slightly more circular in design. When having the mouth closed specifically, you can really see that it's very cuboid in design. I do wish it was slightly more circular, as in the movie Devastator did have a slightly more circular head sculpt. However, considering this was formed out of a Voyager, I can really see why they had some limitations here. And as it stands, I think that the head sculpt is fantastic on its own. An area of criticism that I do have with this is that this head does not articulate at all. You cannot rotate it left to right, you cannot hinge it up and down, which when you try and get this figure into a crawling on all fours pose, the head is consistently looking right down upon the floor. Although not having head articulation to me is a massive deal breaker, I definitely know for some that it is going to be something which they see as a drawback, as initially when I first posed this figure around and I saw that it wasn't really possible to get this figure in a convincing on all fours like we saw in in the movie, I was slightly let down. However, when you have this figure in hand, just honestly, the detail is spectacular and it is a piece to behold within a collection. And I actually think that it looks quite nice standing upright like this. And it's not impossible to get it in a hunched-like pose. It's just not really the best look for the head, as I stated, it does always seem to look down. But nevertheless, quite a nice looking head sculpt, just giving you a side view profile. You can see here that I think the detailing on this really and truly is awesome. So now what we'll do is we'll turn to the scrapper arm, and then we'll go to the scrap metal and high tower combo, take a look at overload, and then take a look at the bottom half of the figure. So taking a look at the scrapper arm, you can see here that it is a Voyager class, whereas the other arm is just made out of 2 deluxes. However, I think that it does scale rather nicely in terms of proportion and does have some nice detailing, such as the different tubes that do jut out from the sides. You are supposed to have this section popped up just to give it a more transformed look, but personally for me it doesn't really matter. I do like how the fingers are on hinge joints, allowing you to give it almost that tripod look that the fingers of Devastator's arm did in fact have within the movie. And just giving you how that looks from a side view perspective. We are in fact able to see all of the mechanical details that did in fact carry over from Scrapper. This thumb here is on a hinge joint, so you can move this out to the side. You could hinge this out to the side, however I do think that this is mainly the thumb joint. You can rotate these prongs out to the sides, but I do believe that they are supposed to be stationary. I do like how you can move these claws around in whatever way you so choose, and the ratchet joint, as stated in my Scrapper review, is incredibly durable, so it does ratchet all the way up, all the way down, and due to Scavenger having hinge joints here, they do in fact allow you to rotate them the full 360 degrees. We can in fact rotate these sections here forwards and backwards, which is quite cool as well. And we can also rotate this section, where I guess this would be the shoulder section. So at the upper shoulder, he does in fact have a rotation joint, allowing you to rotate that up. You could also use the ratchet joint that Scavenger does have, although I'm not entirely sure as to why you would necessarily do that, as it doesn't really allow for many more poses unless you wanted him perhaps reaching out. But then once again, the head is unable to follow the motion of the arm, so it does look rather obscure, but still it's good to see that we do have that level of articulation. And then turning here to the high tower and scrap metal arm, you can see that this is on a ratchet joint. Unfortunately not as sturdy as the ratchet joint that we got on Scrapper, so the arm does tend to just give in when you do have it in a curl position. And one thing I don't particularly like about this is not only the fact that it's made up of 2 deluxes. I do wish that perhaps they had just opted to give Voyagers. I may actually try and track down another Scrapper and see how 2 Scrappers look as an arm for this figure, as I do think that could potentially improve the overall look. I do not like the head of high tower just popping on there. Now you can pop it off, however to pop it back on is a pain, so I really wouldn't recommend that unless you're willing to give it some incredible force to pop it back on. The thumb has got a hinge joint, so you can move this back and forth, as well as this joint. The fingers of scrap metal are on ball joints and hinge joints, as well as this scoop section, so you can rotate that around. As stated, we do get a rotation here, so you can rotate this around and have it more or less looking like this, which I think is quite a cool look. So just setting this back and pulling the camera slightly back, we are in fact able to see here that they are more or less the same size when in this mode, particularly if you do squish the fist in and have the fist of high tower a lot more scrunched up than rather having it elongated, which is the positioning that I really think it should be in to give it that more Devastator vibe. Taking a look at this whole overload ensemble, we can see here that it more or less hides the entire front section of Scavenger's combined mode, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, as that is what it's supposed to do. I love the mechanical detailing that they've got here for the crutch area of Devastator. Unfortunately, we don't have any enemy scrotums, although I imagine a third-party company will in fact come out, such as DNA Designs, and give us an upgrade kit for this, which will greatly amplify its overall look, enhancing what Hasbro have given us already. You can see the back of Overload's head just displayed there, however it doesn't look too noticeable when in this mode. I do like how the cockpit does situate in an upright position within this mode as well, and it just looks really, really awesome. There is a seam here. Now, originally I did think this was waist articulation, but I have tried with quite a lot of force to rotate it and it isn't budging anywhere, and I really don't want to break the joint. So for now, I'm going to say that there isn't any waist articulation. However, that could be a fault on my copy. So if you do get this, be cautious of this, as there could potentially be a waist joint. The only other reason why I think there isn't is because there are some really heavy duty ratchet joints here, and I cannot see where they would add the clearance to put a ratchet or a swivel joint here. The plastic just seems too thin for that, but it is possible that that is the case. Now, something else you'll notice is that we do have scrap metal shield actually pegged on to this section of overload. Great to see them include this and find a place for some of the extra accessories. The stand can actually peg into the back, which I showcased in my overload review. However, it doesn't stay in there too stable, and it does look rather obscure, so I tend to just leave it off. Giving you a quick look at how Devastator looks from the behind, to be honest, he actually doesn't look too bad at all. So we can see here that we do have the grinder section, which I did rewatch the movie, and this is actually accurate. So you could totally have this being the bit that's munching up all of the components that Devastator is consuming. We've got the huge wheel of Scavenger situated here, which is locking into overload, as well as these two tires from overload, and some fantastic silver detailing that's two also carried over from overload. These sections do not have a role to play at all in combining. I originally thought that this would perhaps slide into something. It really doesn't. It's just mainly this section that locks into Rampage and overload. So just giving you a quick look at the back, I actually think that it's quite well how they've distributed the pieces, and it does give you a very movie accurate vibe, which is also quite nice to see. Turning our attention now down to the lower region of the legs. If you are looking for roughly whereabouts overload connects, you can see here that it comes to where these sections of long haul begin. So it does take up this whole thing, and as you saw when I combined this in the previous video, this is not going anywhere. These are really secure joints. Even on Rampage, you can see that it does sit quite considerably lower than what I initially thought it would be, but it doesn't take away from the overall height of the figure. And you can see a closer look at scrap metal shield. So just looking really nice. Now, you heard me state earlier that this figure doesn't in fact have knee joints, and unfortunately it doesn't. So the joint that it does have is this section. Now this is here to allow for clearance of all this. Once again, look at my overload review and you will see why this has to be done. You have to move the claws out, and this locks all this in. So he does not have knees at all, unfortunately, which is a shame. He does, however, have a ratchet joint here, which allows you to kick forward to a really great degree and back to an even better degree. You can hinge the legs all the way out to the sides, which is fantastic. We can also ratchet long hauls foot forwards and backwards, as well as utilize that ratchet joint. On Rampage, it's exactly the same. You can elongate this section, although it is incredibly sturdy and it is supposed to be locked into place, but if you wish, you can bring the joint so it's slightly slanted down. However, personally, I prefer to leave it clicked up. In terms of Rampage's range of motion, we do get a hinge joint, so this can hinge forwards and backwards, as well as actually ratchet forwards and backwards as well, and ratchet side to side. So you are able to get Devastator into quite a wide stance. However, once again, it's not necessarily too achievable to get him in a hunch pose. And just to demonstrate to you the best I could get in terms of an all fours pose, you really just want to hunch this. And as I stated, it does suck that there are no knee joints, as that is really something I think that would greatly benefit this figure. As you begin to hunch him forward, the ratchets do begin to prevail due to the mass weight, and the hands can't really hold him up, and you can see that the head does just look straight down on the ground. So in terms of an all fours pose, this is literally the best you can do. It would have been great if the head could have rotated and looked up. However, this is what we're left with. Not the best, but definitely not the worst, and he does look great when stood up upright. Now, for some comparisons, here we have our new 2020 Studio Series Devastator compared next to the 2009 Supreme Class Devastator. Now, the reasoning behind why I'm doing this comparison was because this figure for many years was my default option to go with a Devastator figure. This was the best one that we could get. However, I can definitely say that it has been replaced by the significantly improved Studio Series figure. This version here didn't have the capability of separating into individual robots and merely had its limbs just convert into vehicles. Also, it didn't have multiple limbs that made up the arms and torso. For example, this is made out of 6 vehicles, whereas this is made out of 8 individual robots. So 2 more than this version, 2 for the torso and 2 for one arm, whereas this was just 1 per each limb. So this one is definitely significantly more accurate to the movie, as that is how many Constructicons in the movie took to form Devastator. I think that when you have these two compared, it really is night and day. If I had anything to say that I think this one could be slightly better on, is the overall circular design to the actual figure's head. Now, this was because this was electronic and you could in fact expand the mouth. Unfortunately, as this is a Generations Voyager, there is no electronic feature nor gimmick to it, so all of the figures are rather collector friendly and don't necessarily have these types of gimmicks, but I do think that it benefits this as the detailing on the face sculpt is a lot better than the detailing on the face sculpt on the original version. And for a comparison, here we have the Studio Series movie Devastator compared next to the 2015 Combiner Wars G1 inspired Devastator. There are literally no similarities between these two at all. The Bayverse version is significantly different than what we got in G1. I just thought it would be fun to compare the most definitive representations of the Devastators from either the movies or the G1 verse. So we can see here that the Devastator from G1 is significantly bigger than the Studio Series version, but each of them are fantastic in their own rights. For some Studio Series size comparisons, here we have the Studio Series Devastator compared next to the second largest Revenge of the Fallen Studio Series figure we have, that being Jetfire. We have him next to the ROTF Voyager Megatron, Jeep Bumblebee from the Bumblebee movie, and then Jetwing Optimus Prime from the Dark of the Moon movie. Now, personally for me, I don't think that the robots are necessarily in scale with Devastator, although I don't think that it's too far off. You can see here that Megatron comes up to roughly halfway of where Overload's torso is, so Devastator still is a massive piece, even when compared next to a leader figure, a Voyager Deluxe, and a Voyager again. He really does tower over them, and he is the biggest Studio Series figure to date, so I guess you could say that this is in fact a Supreme class. So with everything I believe now completely wrapped up, here are some of my final thoughts on this highly anticipated Transformers Studio Series figure. Personally, I love this. Growing up with the Michael Bay movies, Devastator has always been a pinnacle for me. I remember first seeing Devastator transform, and it absolutely blew my mind how all of these evil Decepticons were merging together to create an even more evil monster, and this to me captures that. Whilst it may not be perfect, it may not be able to go on all fours like the movie, I think that the level of detail that we have here is astounding. This is the best we're going to get at the mass retail market. Of course, it's not going to beat the likes of Devil Savior, but I think that we do get quite a nice array of articulation within this mode. We've got hinge joints, swivel joints at the arms, individual finger articulation. There is a rotation joint at the thigh, ratchet joints at the hips, ankle rocker joints, individual finger articulation. The only real point where I believe articulation is lacking is within the head. It would have been great if it could have turned side to side. However, that's not a massive drawback for me, as I'll probably only be really keeping Devastator in a pose like this. And you can see that despite this figure's size, it is actually able to pull off a slightly more varied dynamic pose, which I think that this pose here definitely does evoke. Something else worth mentioning is that this is a major departure from the prototype and the prototype images that we were shown back when this figure was first unveiled, and that was because at that point only Long Haul, Rampage and Scrap Metal had been created. The rest of the figures were probably not even thought about. So after 18 months, of course things go through changes. The only real thing that I would have liked to have seen them include would be perhaps some missile accessories to attach on either side of Devastator's shoulders, as within the movie they were a detail that I did notice, and he did actually fire them at the twins when they were jumping all over him, trying to take him down before he got to the Sun Harvester. Even if you're not a fan of the overall look of the combined mode, there is no denying that there are some tremendous figures within this wave. I think that the Voyagers and Leaders are astounding, by far the best figures that we've got from Hasbro in a long time. The Deluxes are probably the weakest out of the wave, however they are the smallest to have budgetary constraints, but considering they do combine to form one limb, I do think they do quite a nice job, and they do pull off a Voyager sized combiner when compared next to the Voyager Scrapper. Personally, I think that this figure was definitely worth the wait, and I cannot wait to see what Hasbro have up their sleeves. I really do hope that they approach a Dragonstorm or an Infernicus, as other than Devastator, I really cannot think of the next big project they could do unless they were to completely blow our minds and take hold of the Dark of the Moon Driller. So with all that being said, that is my complete video on the Transformers Studio Series Devastator. I hope you have enjoyed watching each of my reviews on these Constructicons, and once again you can check out my Constructicon playlist where I have in fact reviewed all of these figures and showed you how to combine them in order to form this figure. I hope you enjoyed my review. If you did, please let me know down in the comment section below, and be sure to let me know down in the comments any questions you have regarding this figure, and if some of them are something which I haven't perhaps noticed, I may come back and do an update video. I thank you all for watching this video, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.